So this is for Vita. Last Sunday she said you sort of looked up and you sort of looked down and sort of half and half. And I said I could have stayed looking up for 10 more hours. So I decided today, whatever happens, it's for Vita. You all right, Pat? So I haven't been speaking at the Madison Avenue community meal. We had COVID and we didn't have people sitting together, so we gave people sack lunches. So Monday night I went down and Simon had decided everybody could sit inside. And, you know, I did what I usually do, which is just visit with the people. I'm the only volunteer that sits down with the people that are actually eating. And I learn all kinds of things. You know, just amazing what you can learn. And Simon said, "Come here a minute." So I walked up to where he was and he handed me a microphone and said, "Give us a devotional." Can you give us a song, Peter? So I said, how many people remember 2 years ago when we did 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1? And out of the 30 or 40 there, 2 people held up their hand. So a lot of those people got jobs. Some of those people have died. So I said, I'm going to teach you the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. And we won't get it right, but over the next 10 or 20 or 30 weeks, we'll eventually get it right. So let's see if we can do it. You do it with me. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Wow. You all been to church camp or something. So this story, if I had one story that I'd like everybody to know, this would be the story. After we did the 1, 2, 3 and I told the story, I closed with the Lord's Prayer. And they reminded me they don't know the Lord's Prayer. And I said, you guys didn't go to school where you had to learn the Lord's Prayer. So you don't know it. So we'll do it, Our Father, and then you say Our Father. So that's what we did. And we got, and they pretty well repeated it after me. So this story it's certainly on the list of the top 10 stories in the New Testament for me. So Jesus tells them there was a man who had 2 sons. And he had a son who wanted his inheritance. And he was the younger son, so he deserved a third of the estate. I don't know how it was then, but today most small farmers couldn't come up with a third of the cash necessary for their estate because the farms are worth so much more than the investment returns. But he asked for his third, and he goes off into the far country. Now the older brother stays home, and he farms, and he raises wheat, and milks cows or goats, takes care of the oxen, the donkeys, raises a garden. Just take one little thing of wheat. You cultivate the ground with an ox, you sow the wheat, you watch it grow, you tend to it, and then you harvest it, and you cut it with a scythe. Is that the right word? A sickle. And my daddy put one of those in my hand one time to clean the fence row. I thought I was going to die. I went and got one of these like this, and I survived. But that's how they did it. And then they bound them into sheaves. And I think I can remember sheaves in the field, because I do remember the threshing machine coming to our farm when I was like 6 or 8 or something like that. And they were bringing in all these sheaves of wheat, and they're throwing them in the, what do they call that machine? The threshing machine. So they bind the sheaves, and then they take them to the threshing floor. And if they're poor, they take a stick like a bat, a baseball bat, and they hammer them, and they separate the wheat from the chaff. And hopefully the wind will blow the chaff away. But if not, they'll get a big fan and blow it away. They pick up the wheat and they take it to the millstone. And the millstone can weigh as much as 3,500 pounds. And there's 2 stones, one on top of the other, and they're massive. And the one stone has little grooves in it, little channels. And you pour the wheat in the middle, and the wheat goes down and eventually gets in those little channels. Now I thought, how in the world can you have the strength to turn that wheel when it weighs so much? Well, the answer must be the wheat sort of serves like roller bearings. So the wheat makes it much easier to turn than I first imagined. So the wheat goes into the channels, and then it goes into a place that's more flat, and eventually it comes out as flour. And you gather the flour, and then you can make bread or fajitas or any kind of bread product. Now, imagine that they made bread. They found some bread that they believe was made in 8,000 BC. So people have been making bread 4,000 years before we had written history. So bread is pretty old. So this older son does all the farm work. He watches the servants. He does everything that needs to be done, and you can just imagine he worked himself nearly to death. The closest thing I can think of in our history that sort of parallels this story would be Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin is in the top 10 of the most important people in U.S. history. I mean, I think he's above Washington and just about everybody else as far as us becoming a country separate from Britain. And the reason he was so influential is he was a printer, and he wrote a magazine, and he mailed it out, and he put in Poor Richard's sayings, and thought it was entertaining. And so he had a huge circulation, and it went to most of the colonies. People read it. And he was the postmaster of every colony. So he visited all the colonies. You got to remember that each colony was like a separate country. And they didn't interchange except for trade and postage, letters. So he got the idea way early that they ought to get united. Probably he was thinking they ought to be one colony like Canada. So Ben Franklin is revered. He's been on postage stamps. There's been busts of him. He's on the $100 bill. And what do we call the $100 bills? We call them Franklins, because his image is on those bills. But there's a dark side to Franklin. He had an illegitimate son, and that son's name was William. And Ben and William went across to England. Seemed like they went across every other year. I mean, they made numerous trips back and forth. And they were very close. But when it came time that he could become the governor of New Jersey, he became the governor of New Jersey. And then the Declaration of Independence is circulating, and Ben Franklin signs the Declaration of Independence. Actually, he does more than that. He edits it. Jefferson wrote it, but he edits it because Jefferson had, "We hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable." Franklin scratched that out and wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident." So Franklin made a huge change. So William is now forced to make a decision for the United States, the United Colonies, or a decision for Britain. He decides that he is going to be on the side of Britain, and he leaves the United Colonies and goes to Britain. After the war, how many years was the war? 77, 1860. Give me the right century. 1776 to 1781 or something like that. And he, after the war ends in Virginia, Franklin goes to Paris. And in Paris, he negotiates the peace for the United States and Great Britain. William in England sends him a letter and begs him to come and stop by England, London, on the way home. Franklin ignores the letter and goes back to the United Colonies. Franklin's mother, nobody knows to this day who Franklin's mother was. So Franklin had an affair which gave us William, and he had a mother of his child that he never identified. So Franklin had this very dark side that nobody but a preacher would ever bring up. Now the younger son goes into the far country. And I like to think, in our time, he would go to Vegas. I hear a lot of people go to Vegas in March Madness time because it's really easy to bet on the teams. You can't hardly stay home and call and do it. I guess you can, but a lot of people go to Vegas, so it's easy to bet. The younger son has a lot of money, but he wastes it. He spends it on prostitutes. He spends it gambling. He spends it drinking. Today he would spend it on drugs. Eventually, he runs out of money and he runs out of friends. Now, I can't leave March Madness because of the Peacocks. Who ever heard of the Peacocks? They are in the Elite Eight. No team has ever been a 15 seed that got to the Elite Eight. And they play, if you bet on them, you're in the money. 0.75% have bet on them. And I'll bet you most of them are Catholics who voted for all the Catholic teams. Anyway, if they win tonight, they play at 5:05, not that I looked that up. they play North Carolina, and if they can beat Kentucky, Murray State, and Purdue, maybe, just maybe, they can beat North Carolina. I've only watched 2 games, and both of them were the Peacocks.
They beat North Carolina, they got Duke.
Say?
They beat North Carolina, they have to play Duke.
Well, if they can beat North Carolina, they can possibly beat Duke. So the younger son squanders everything. He gets poor. He ends up eating what are called kebab pods. And they were some kind of fruit, not very good tasting fruit, but some kind of fruit they fed the pigs. When I think of it, I think of the pumpkins Daddy had me raise, and I used to throw them on the ground and crack so the pigs would eat them. And if you were real poor and you didn't have any money and you were starving, you could eat those. And they were nourishing, but they weren't tasty. John the Baptist is reported to have eaten those kebabs. So he's been here miserable, poor, homeless, and he says, you know what? My dad's servants have it better than I have it. And so he comes to himself and he decides to go home and tell his father that he would like him to hire him as a servant. So he's coming down the road, and his father is looking for him. He's looking for him every day. I looked up a choir that sang in Great Britain, and it was made up of people who had lost children that they had never seen after they were gone. And those people gave stories of what it is like, day after day, year after year, wondering if their child is dead or alive, anything. They had about 30 in this choir, and 2 people found their children because this was on Somebody's Got Talent. So he's been longing for this son, and the son goes in, and when he sees his father runs up, hugs him, kisses him, says, we're going to have a big party, we're going to kill the fatted calf, and the son is overwhelmed. I like to think that had I done what the young son did, my dad would have embraced me in the same way, because he never, ever fussed at me. So the older brother comes in from the field, and he says, what is this? You're having this party for your son who's been gone, he doesn't do any work, hadn't helped out. And the father says, you have been with me the whole time. And the younger son wanted to say, Dad, I have worked my heart out for you, and you never rewarded me. It's not fair. Franklin never reunited with his son and never did his mother justice. So in my mind, Franklin is like the older brother. When I started to talk at the church, I said, there's one thing I want you to know. God does not reward bad behavior. God does not punish bad behavior. And you think about that. The Father never punishes the son for what he did. So if you're Eric Rudolph and you're in the Supermax prison in Colorado and you spend 23 and a half hours every day in solitary confinement, God does not punish you. If you're Eric Rudolph, who did the bombing in Atlanta during the Olympics, God will welcome you with open arms. God does not punish bad behavior. And that's the lesson of the prodigal son. Thank you very much.